unifying, and to have the resources, the intellectual, the political, the financial resources to win. And we have to say to everyone, when we leave here, we have to be getting to work. The euphoria is wonderful, but only as an engine to do the work that needs to be done.
Let me ask you then about the House races. If there is a contested election, it's going to matter who has control of the House. How has her nomination changed the map for those members you know so well in those districts that are tight?
Well, our members have been very pleased in the last few weeks with the increased volunteerism that has emerged in their district, the small donor contributions, just the willingness to vote. Young people weren't even interested in, some of them weren't even interested in voting. So all of that is very upbeat, and the members can quantify it. It just translates into success. We will win the House. We only need to win 4 seats. We will win the House. But your question is the right one, because on January 6th, Hakeem Jeffries must be the Speaker of the House. I say that from experience. Thank God I was the Speaker of the House on January 6th last time.
Yes. You know, your book is out now, the Hour of Power. I really enjoyed the book, and there's a line that stands out to me where you said, sometimes in politics, you have to take a punch, and sometimes you have to throw a punch. So my question to you is, how many punches do you think the Democrats need to throw to make sure that Kamala Harris is elected? Do you think that's going to be necessary?
Let's finish the sentence. To take a punch, throw a punch. For the children.
Yeah.
And so I think that Democrats are ready. Elections are about the future. They're not, everything we've done is important to say, to prove that we can be effective. But really, people want to know how it translates to their kitchen table discussion on the cost of housing and health care and education, their jobs, their pensions, their freedom of expression, their freedom to have a family if they wish and when.
You did not mention the economy or immigration. Those two issues are top of mind for voters, and those are ones that President Trump is saying that the Biden-Harris administration has failed on.
Well, when I talk about the cost of housing, the cost of health care, the stability of their pension and their job, I'm talking about the economy, how it translates at the kitchen table. And the fact is that that's how people are interested in the economy, how it affects them, in my view. It's not the boardroom table, it's not the cabinet table, it's their kitchen table. In terms of immigration, I think it's very clear. There is a path. There was a path.
Say that again.
What's his name? The former president said to the Republicans, don't give them a victory. So there is a substantive policy pass on how to deal with that. And we can even do better, probably, as people know more about it, to go forward. So what people have to know is a decision was made to win, a path to victory, and a fair and clear discussion of the issues, all of them.
Madam Speaker, you made history as the first female Speaker of the House. Kamala Harris is on the verge of making history. How hard is it to campaign and while you have the burden of making history at the same time? How hard is it to do the job, also campaign, and the burden of all eyes on you?
Well, I say it another way. I can bake the pie or I can sell the pie, but it's hard to sell the pie while you're baking it. And by the way, Kamala's a very good cook. But, it's just what you have to do. And people ask, is this a long time or a short time, 75 days? Well, in some ways, it's just the right amount of time to be able to do your job, tell people about it, and win the election. There's something very special going on. It's very exciting, but we can't mistake that for an electoral victory. We just have to just win, baby.
Well, we all like a good pie here, no doubt. Apple pie is my favorite. Speaker Pelosi, always good to have you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to see you again.
And let's go now to the convention floor where CBS Morning's co-host Tony Dokoupil is there. Good evening, Tony.
Hey, good evening, Nora. You know, multiple times this evening, and past evenings, I've talked about the energy in the room here and how remarkable it is. It's very easy to forget that just last month, Joe Biden was saying, I'm the president, I'm the nominee, and I'm running in 2024. And so I've made a point over the last few days to ask the delegates here 3 particular questions. The first one is, when exactly did you throw your support behind Kamala Harris for president as opposed to something else? And the answer is right away on that Sunday. The moment that Joe Biden dropped out, it was like he uncorked something spectacular, and that support immediately went and unconditionally went to Kamala Harris. The second question I ask is one that a lot of people have been asking. Is it not unusual to have a candidate first, and now we're waiting on what the policies will be in their specifics? And people do acknowledge, yeah, that's a little bit unusual, but guess what, Tony? We're living through unusual times. And then finally, I asked the question, are you not concerned that she will go in a direction that is different from the Biden administration and maybe doesn't align perfectly with your values, maybe on marijuana legalization, maybe on energy, maybe on immigration? And people say, they are, in some respects, concerned, but overall, they know all they need to know on reproductive rights and on the alternative. On character and values, the people in this room support Kamala Harris, regardless of what policies may come down the line. So that's something that's in the air tonight, those 3 questions, and I just wanted to give our viewers a little insight into what the thinking is in the room on those points. And I'll send it back to you on that note.
Tony Dokoupil, thank you so much. And our senior White House and political correspondent, Ed O'Keefe, is also on the convention floor. Good evening, Ed.
Good evening, Nora. We are down here near the front row, and you may be asking yourself, who gets a front row seat at the Democratic Convention? Well, you got to be a member of the California delegation, and you got to be a constitutional officer so California's Secretary of State, Insurance Commissioner, the Attorney General, the longest-serving member of the House of Representatives, Zoe Lofgren, that's who gets the front row seat if you're in the California delegation. One thing about tonight, we've been talking a little bit about the history, the obvious history, that Kamala Harris is about to be nominated by the Democratic Party. Her speech tonight coincides with the 60th anniversary of the 1964 Democratic Convention. And Fannie Lou Hamer, a woman from Mississippi, came to the Democratic Convention and denounced her party for not letting her sit with an integrated delegation from her home state of Mississippi. Several speakers this week have called out that speech as an example of the progress made by the country and by the Democratic Party. Another example of the progress, I'm joined now by Deon Fox, who is a city councilwoman in Inglewood, California. You're also wearing a color that we're going to see a lot in the crowd tonight, pink and green.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So this is our sorority colors. We are a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and our colors are salmon pink and apple green, and so it represents our sorority.
And the vice president is a member.
Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. We're so excited to see her come into the president's office.
I mean, this is a very big deal for your organization now, because this is an organization, a sisterhood, a sorority all over the country, at all levels of politics, corporate leadership, education, but now to think that one of your members might become president.
No, that is amazing. It means so much to our sorority. We are the first African-American college-educated sorority, and we were founded in 1908, and we strive on excellence, and Kamala Harris represents excellence for our sorority, and we were so proud to see her become the Vice President of the United States in November 2020, and now to see her be nominated to be the first African-American president for the United States is just amazing. Our sorority is elated.
So, salmon pink, apple green.
And apple green.
You see that in the crowd tonight? They're probably a member AKA. Nora, back up to you.
Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much, and want to bring you up to date because just moments ago, President Biden tweeted this: Jill and I just spoke to Kamala Harris. We can't wait to watch her accept this historic nomination. Kamala and Tim will inspire a generation and lead us into the future. There you see the president and the first lady cheering on the vice president as she prepares to introduce herself to the nation in a new way as someone who, not as the vice president, but someone who wants to be commander-in-chief. Now, this section of the convention is focusing on gun violence. Georgia Representative Lucy McBath is speaking next. Her son was shot and killed 12 years ago while sitting in the backseat of a friend's car. In the wake of his death, McBath, a two-time breast cancer survivor, dedicated her life to gun reform. Let's
I saw
listen.
firsthand the power of telling our stories. You've just heard mine, but there are many more to tell.
On December 14th, 2012, I walked into Sandy Hook School. I stopped at the office, chatted with my principal, then started my day with my second graders. Suddenly, a loud crash, like metal folding chairs falling. 154 gunshots blaring. Hiding in the coats, trying to sing with my students, trying to read to them, trying to drown out the sounds. Terror, crying, running. I carry that horrific day with me. 20 beautiful first grade children and 6 of my beautiful colleagues were killed. They should still be here.
It's 10:30 a.m. at Robb Elementary in Uvalde. The school is recognizing my 10-year-old daughter, Lexi, for receiving all A's. She receives a Good Citizen Award, and we pose for photos. She wears a St. Mary's sweatshirt and a smile that lights up the room. 30 minutes later, a gunman murders her, 18 classmates, and 2 teachers. We are taken to a private room where police tell us she isn't coming home. Uvalde is national news. Parents everywhere reach for their children. I reach out for the daughter I will never hold again.
My niece, Sandy Patrice, was 22. She drove to Myrtle Beach for sun and fun and motorcycle parades. Hours later, my phone rang. Shooting on the beach. No one can find Sandy. I stayed calm. You see, my mother, Patricia Ann, had been shot and killed by an abusive partner. I was calm then, too. I got to handling business. I called relatives, the police, hospitals, and I kept calling, voice steady, heartbeat pulsing. Then I was connected to the coroner. 10 years of waiting, and Sandy's murder is still unsolved. I'll keep calling, and I'll keep fighting.
I was in high school when my classmate got shot. It changed my story. Instead of worrying about taking a test, I started worrying about living to take another test. They say schools are for learning, and I did learn a lot that day. I learned how to run, how to hide and drop, that what happens in the news can happen to me. But I learned something else too, that we can write and must write a new story if we choose to.
Our stories of loss, But make no mistake, our losses do not weaken us. They strengthen our resolve. We will secure safer futures that we all deserve. We will organize. We will advocate. We will run for office. And we will join with Americans from small towns and big cities to keep our communities safe. And we will elect leaders like Kamala Harris, who won't just empathize, but will act.
And some powerful speeches there from mothers who lost their children in Sandy Hook and Uvalde. And they've just introduced former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, herself a mass shooting survivor and prominent gun control activist. In 2011, she was shot in the head during that mass shooting. It was one that left 6 people dead and 13 injured. She still suffers from aphasia. That's a brain disorder that affects how she speaks, and that's her husband, Senator Mark Kelly. Let's listen in now.
Hello, fellow Americans! I'm Gabby Giffords. I was born in the great state of Arizona! I was born with grit. I grew up racing motorcycles, mucking stalls, and exploring the beautiful desert. I fell for an astronaut. For 5 years, I served in Congress from a swing district. Everybody called me a rising star. Then on January 8th, 2011, a man tried to assassinate me. He shot 19 people. He killed 6. Terrible, terrible day. I almost died, but I fought for my life and I survived. I learned to walk again, one step at a time. I learned to talk again, one word at a time. So many people helped me as I worked hard to recover, including a decent man for Delaware who always checked in. He still does. Thank you, Joe Biden. Thank you for everything. Joe is a great president. My friend Kamala will be a great president. She is tough. She has grit. Kamala can beat the gun lobby. She can fight gun trafficking. Kamala stood up to Wall Street and the drug company. She will protect abortion access. She will defend our freedom. She saved lives. Join me in voting for Kamala Harris. Bravo! Thank you.
And Gabby Giffords, one of the most prominent gun control activists in the country, speaks out all of the time and has developed quite a following. And her husband, Senator Mark Kelly, the astronaut from Arizona, who was on the short list to become Vice President Harris's choice to be the #2 pick.
But can we just take a second and acknowledge Gabby Gifford, what she just did? I remember, we all remember when that shooting happened. And at first it was reported that she didn't make it, and then they quickly had to reverse the story. But I remember when she was first recovering, she couldn't really walk, she couldn't really talk. So to see her walking and talking and being as enthusiastic as she is, just really fills you up.
Yeah.
And that she's now using, talk about turning your pain into purpose. That is exactly what she's doing.
It's really amazing to hear her give a speech like that, because
Exactly, Nancy.
I remember in the beginning for years, she would just speak in very short sentences. She could get some words out and not others. And so it's really impressive to see how far she's come.
And also to hear from a number of the mothers right before then, from Sandy Hook, Gail, you and I were there, to Uvalde, the pain that is still so raw for all of these families.
And that's why I think it's so important to hear the mothers and hear these stories, because for so many people it's a news story and everybody moves on, and these people are still living with this. Looks like Pink is about to take the stage.
We're about to hear from Pink and her daughter, Willow.
We're searchlights we can see in the dark. When you call, but man, you fool. Trust, what about us? Sticks and stones, they may break these bones, but then I'll be ready.
poignant to hear from Pink and her daughter with that song, What About Us? Pink said she wrote that song because she said it was just another day I was angry about what's happening in the world, coming right after this discussion about gun violence.
And her daughter's incredibly talented, too. I'm still recovering from the beauty of that song.
Yeah, the two of them together are really nice to see that.
This is part of some of the performances and speeches we will hear tonight, all leading up to the Vice President, Kamala Harris, and where she will introduce not only part of her personal story and biography that people may not be familiar with, Nancy, but also what she plans to do as President of the United States and Commander-in-Chief. What do we know about what she'll say?
She is going to lay out her approach to leadership. She wants to make it clear to the country that while she has been a partner to Joe Biden for the last 3.5 years, that she has her own style, her own vision. She is going to walk the country through her biography, growing up in Oakland, California, and then developing a dream of becoming a prosecutor because she had a good friend who was 14 years old who was being abused, and that set her down the path that has brought her here to Chicago, night 4 of the Democratic National Convention.
Let's listen now to Arizona Senator Mark Kelly.
Hello, Democrats. So, President Obama had to follow Michelle. I had to follow Gabby and Pink. Gabby amazes me every single day. She was able to walk out and address you tonight because she's a fighter. And thanks to a team of doctors, nurses, and especially her speech therapist. We all need a team. I've flown into space 4 times. I've flown into combat nearly 40 times. Not once did I do that by myself. It took a team to accomplish a mission. It always does. I flew in the Navy during the first Gulf War. America rallied our allies to kick out a tyrant who invaded a neighbor. Today, Vladimir Putin is testing whether we're still that strong. Iran, North Korea, and especially China watch closely. What's Trump's answer? He invited Russia to do, and these are his words, not mine, whatever the hell they want. Vice President Harris has always championed America's support for NATO, for Ukraine, and for the Ukrainian people. On the Senate Intelligence Committee, she investigated Russian interference in our election. She defends free and fair elections everywhere. You already know how Trump feels about those. Donald Trump skipped his intelligence briefings. He was too busy sucking up to dictators and dreaming of becoming one himself. Trump thinks that Americans who have made the ultimate sacrifice are suckers and losers. If we fall for that again and make him the commander-in-chief, the only suckers would be us. Kamala Harris knows that standing with our allies means standing up for Americans. She'll keep modernizing our military to support our troops and to support our veterans like our next Vice President, Tim Walz. The world laughs at Trump, literally. But folks, it is not funny. When he was president, that meant the world was laughing at us. The threats we face are too serious. The sacrifices our service members make are too sacred. The alliances we've spent decades building are too critical. That's what's at stake now. And the choice isn't even close. But in Arizona and nationwide, this election will be. We'll win in the same way we launch rockets into space and land fighter jets on an aircraft carrier as one team on one mission. State by state, voter by voter, coming together. No country is better than ours at solving big problems. So, on November 5th, let's prove that America is still the leader the world needs today by electing the leader we need right now, Kamala Harris. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Coming up, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and later, Kamala Harris accepts the presidential nomination. You're watching CBS News coverage of the Democratic National Convention.
Don't think I can hold it. Bladder leak. If you don't pay yourself a little, isn't even a workout.
Always Discreet keeps me dry during even the toughest workout, absorbing up to a cupful with up to 0 wet feel and odor. So I'm not just dry, I'm jump squats level dry.
Ready for a second set?
Everyday protection for every level of leak. We've got you always. Always Discreet.
At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. They put their names on arenas, we put ours on my lower back. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. And if this were one of their ads, they'd end it here with a happy customer. So we'll end ours with an angry goat. Ooh, look at the angry goat.
Oh, nothing works on this acne.
Hi. Who? I'm a licensed dermatology provider from Curology. Answer a few questions, I'll look at your skin and prescribe you a personalized cream.
Wow.
Curology, skincare with a face.
Remains found this week. 4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel. A gripping true crime original. 48 Hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Are you confident that there will be a peaceful transfer of power?
President Biden's first interview since his historic announcement on CBS Sunday Morning.
This week on CBS News 24/7, all-day coverage of the Democratic National Convention with special editions of America Decides and the Daily Report with John Dickerson, and followed by complete coverage from the CBS News political team live from Chicago. Stream all-day coverage this week here on CBS News 24/7.
Sunday Morning, the TV show that changed everything, plus actor Jude Law and second gentleman Doug Emhoff. Listen for the trumpet.
I think I asked direct questions. I don't know that they're tough questions per se. Why aren't you holding yourself to that standard? It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. What has to happen? That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand, and that means a civil conversation with perspective.
Well, I have their attention, clearly, and they've gotten yours.
You'll be surprised at what the U.S. Commerce Secretary is responsible for.
We allowed manufacturing in this country to wither on the vine.
Gina Raimondo on 60 Minutes.
This was the day that I was sworn in.
Amid the chaos on Capitol Hill, this Democratic leader has been able to reach across the aisle to avert crisis and get some things done.
We were sent by the American people to solve problems.
Hakeem Jeffries explains how.
Welcome back to CBS News coverage of the Democratic National Convention, where we will hear tonight from Vice President Kamala Harris. And want to go now to our senior White House correspondent, Weijia Jiang, because she is right near the stage where we will hear from the Vice President. It's called the podium position. And Weijia, you have a bird's eye view of everything that's happening there, center stage.
And Nora, when I look out, I see a sea of white. And that is because these women have chosen to wear it to honor the legacy of the suffragettes, those who fought so hard to give women the right to vote. And tonight, 104 years after the 19th Amendment gave women that right, it also represents what tonight means, how much progress women have made with its first ever Black and South Asian woman to become the presidential nominee in any major party. Of course, the theme of tonight is for the future. The centerpiece of her campaign for the vice president is freedom. And it is notable that just 2 days ago, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said that if Democrats control Congress, at the very top of the legislative agenda will be voting rights. But white is not only used to honor voting rights for women, but also other women's rights. In fact, the vice president wore this color back in November of 2020 when she made history back then as the vice president-elect. And that was also a nod to those who came before her, including Hillary Clinton, who wore white when she accepted the presidential nomination. Of course, Nora, when we're talking about the extraordinary things women do, what they wear is the last thing we want to talk about unless it holds so much significance. Back to you.
Weijia Jiang, thank you. That's right. And just as a reminder of the long fight by both women and minorities to get the right to vote, it was first proposed, the 19th Amendment, in Congress in 1878. And it took until 1919 when it was approved by both houses of Congress and then later ratified in 1920, the 19th Amendment that gave women the right to vote. So a long struggle that women recognizing tonight. I want to bring in our chief election campaign correspondent, Robert Costa. And I understand, Robert, you have some new reporting on the state of this race. Robert?
I've been checking in, Nora. Good to be with you. With two presidents, two people close to those two presidents. President Biden in California tonight did speak with Vice President Harris. I'm told by people close to him, he's at ease. He's with the First Lady. He feels good about where the Democratic Party is with this convention. And he's trying to give his partner in power, his partner in governing, some space tonight to take command of the party, to really be the Democratic nominee and show the country she's ready to be president. Another president who's watching all of this very closely in Arizona is former President Donald Trump. He is going to focus in the coming days on immigration and border security. And his top aides tell me he is ready to go to political war in the coming weeks, highlighting his position on the economy and the border. But it's such a reckoning for both of these parties to have a new nominee for the Democrats in just under a month since all of the tumult in June and July of this summer. When I was with President Biden in the residence just a few weeks ago, he pointed up at a portrait of former President Ulysses S. Grant, and he said to me, this is really about the country, when he was talking about his decision, talking about the Union back then during the Civil War. And he said the future of democracy in the Union now. High stakes in the eyes of both of these presidents, former President Trump, President Biden, and a possible future president on stage tonight. But she sure has quite a campaign ahead.
Robert Costa, thank you so much. Let's head now to the convention floor with Tony Dokoupil. Good evening, Tony.
Hey, good evening, Nora. You know, there have been a concerted effort tonight to endorse Kamala Harris, not just as the next president, but as the next commander-in-chief, and of course, the first female commander-in-chief. I've been looking around for a reaction to that, and turns out just over my shoulder was Congresswoman Yvette Clarke from my home district of Brooklyn. Yvette Clarke, Congresswoman, thank you very much for talking to us tonight about this effort to endorse Kamala Harris as not just president, but commander-in-chief. What do you make of it?
I think it's important. It's important for our nation to know that we have someone poised to become president of the United States who understands the need to defend our nation against, foreign entities, whether that be through deploying troops, setting up a military structure that is vigilant, or on the internet, where we know we're constantly under threat from foreign entities.
Congresswoman, in your political career, you've been opposed to the Iraq War. You've been critical of the Patriot Act. What kind of commander-in-chief do you think Kamala Harris will be?
Well, I think she's going to strengthen NATO. We have really embarked upon understanding a new dynamic in the ever-changing global society that we live in. And to his credit, President Biden has done some extraordinary work in bringing NATO together, understanding the threats we face right now, whether it's in Ukraine or the Middle East. I think Kamala Harris will build on that and bring her unique skills to bear in that regard.
And finally, Congresswoman, the American flag has a prominent place at this convention this time around. Why, and what do you think it's saying to the country, to the Republican Party, about our politics right now?
Well, I think what this convention says is that we are mature enough to understand that unity is our strength. And under the banner of the beautiful red, white, and blue, our flag, we stand as patriots. In making sure that we move our nation forward with leadership, with integrity, with leadership that understands the dynamics of the 21st century requires that we bring people together and not separate them.
Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And on a totally different topic, Nora, as I toss back to you, Gayle King, the Congresswoman, joins me in inviting you once again over the river into Brooklyn. It's a beautiful borough. You should visit it sometime, at least more frequently than you have. Please. It's great.
I'm getting my passport updated. Thank you very much.
You bet.
We know you have a grandchildren in Los Angeles, and if you have any free time, you're going to visit those grandkids. And
plain smoking.
We have received some early excerpts of what we will hear from Kamala Harris tonight. And on that question that Tony was just raising, about commander-in-chief, she is going to make the case tonight that Donald Trump is an unserious man, in her words. Dangerous. This is extremely serious. Nancy, what else will she talk about?
She is going to contrast her vision with Donald Trump. She is going to go there, I'm told. She is going to talk about him. She's going to talk about how dangerous, in her view, he is for the country. And she's going to talk very explicitly about Project 2025, this blueprint that conservative Republicans have put forward, that they have gone back to time and time again here at the Democratic Convention. Donald Trump now says he doesn't know anything about it, but these are close allies of his who have put it together, and she is going to work once again to link it with Donald Trump.
Just want to point out that on the stage right now are veterans, lawmakers who are veterans, and that's what these American flags are about, is showing that this is a party that is pro-military, that is pro-national security, and protects the rights of veterans.
That's exactly right, Nora. And it's one thing for a candidate to assert some things. One of the things they've been trying to do for 4 days is say, here is a story of America and the story of the party, and we can drop the nominee into that. And so, to your point, Nora, the number of veterans who have testified about their own service. Senator Kelly, Ruben Gallego, who's just up there with all those veterans. Adam Kinzinger, the former congressman, who's also a veteran, will be speaking. It puts the party in the conversation about the military as if it's a natural thing, and that helps with her credentials as much as anything she may say.
It's an excellent point. You can hear the cheering behind me because this is Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
Gretchen Whitmer. In Lansing, they call me governor. But in Detroit, they call me Big Gretch. Donald Trump called me that woman from Michigan as an insult. Being a woman from Michigan is a badge of honor. Like women across America, we just GSD. Get stuff done. At 29, I joined the sandwich generation. Sandwiched between working and raising my newborn and caring for my mom, who was dying from brain cancer. It was hard, but not extraordinary. It's life. Those nights reminded me who I was fighting for. People just trying to make it. Kamala Harris knows who she's fighting for, too. She took care of her mom, who also battled cancer. As president, she'll fight to lower the cost of health care and elder care for every family. She's lived a life like ours. She knows us. Donald Trump doesn't know you at all. You think he understands that when your car breaks down, you can't get to work? No. His first word was probably chauffeur. You think he's ever had to take items out of the cart before checking out? Hell, you think he's ever been to a grocery store? That's what the chauffeur is for. But Kamala Harris, she gets us. She sees us. She is us. Look, we've all lived through a lot of history over the past few years. Floods and fires, an attempted coup, a plot, and a pandemic. It's exhausting. We don't know what the next 4 years will bring. But what we do know is this. Through it all, your life won't stop. You're going to have to get to work, pick up the kids, and pay your bills. And then one day, when you're just trying to get everyone out the door, a news alert goes off. Something happened. Something hit the fan. You'll ask, is my family going to be okay? And then you'll ask, who the hell is in charge? What if it's him? What if it's that man from Mar-a-Lago? I know, in a crisis, we need someone strong enough to come up with a plan, to tell the truth, and to bring people together. Right now, before the crisis, is when we get to choose. Why wouldn't we choose the leader who's tough, tested, and a total badass? I know who I want as our commander-in-chief. America let's choose Kamala Harris.
And that was Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer ahead. Presidential nominee Kamala Harris takes the stage. We'll be right back.
We'll leave the light on for opening acts. The ones who hit the road with a guitar and a dream and pile into a van that's about ready to give up. Bands like Action Adventure aren't on top of the marquee yet, but they know if they play like there's a packed house, one day there will be. And wherever the music takes them, they'll always have a place to stay at Motel 6, with beds a whole lot comfier than the van. Book your room at motel6.com, and we'll leave the light on for you.
I know it's late and you all have families, but I'm just going to keep talking.
Just add crayon. Crayon mango for you. And boss, you get a crayon pineapple if you admit this could have been an email.
Nice dress.
You too.
Best part? It has pockets. I know. Oh my gosh.
Well, that and the cash back.
What?
With Rakuten. It's a shopping app. I saved a ton on our dress.
This is unbelievable. This is unbelievable. I know, right?
You're gonna get so much cash back.
Okay, I'm gonna go change, because...
A Chewy pharmacy order is en route for Summit, who loves the outdoors. So her parents used Chewy to save 20% on their first order of flea and tick meds. Delivered fast so Summit never misses a dose or an adventure. For quality meds, for life with pets, there's Chewy.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I think I asked direct questions. I don't know that they're tough questions per se. Why aren't you holding yourself to that standard? It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. What has to happen? That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand, and that means a civil conversation with perspective.
Sunday morning, the TV show that changed everything, plus actor Jude Law and second gentleman Doug Emhoff. Listen for the trumpet.
Well, I have their attention, clearly, and they've gotten yours.
You'll be surprised at what the U.S. Commerce Secretary is responsible for.
We allowed manufacturing in this country to wither on the vine.
Gina Raimondo on 60 Minutes.
This was the day that I was sworn in.
Sunday morning, Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, plus former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on the art of governing. Listen for the trumpet.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I'll see you in the morning.
Welcome back to CBS News coverage of the Democratic National Convention. And now we're going to hear from the former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, representing Illinois. You might remember in the wake of the 2020 election, Kinzinger became known for his criticism of Trump's attempts to overturn the election. Let's listen in now.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm Adam Kinzinger, and I am proud to be in the trenches with you as part of this sometimes awkward alliance that we have to defend truth, defend democracy, and decency. I was just a kid when I was drawn to the party of Ronald Reagan, to his vision of a strong America, the shining city on a hill. I was a Republican for 12 years in Congress, and I still hold on to the label. I never thought I'd be here, but listen, you never thought you'd see me here, did you? But I've learned something about the Democratic Party, and I want to let my fellow Republicans in on the secret. The Democrats are as patriotic as us. They love this country just as much as we do. And they are as eager to defend American values at home and abroad as we conservatives have ever been. I was relieved to discover that because I've learned something about my party too, something I couldn't ignore. The Republican Party is no longer conservative. It has switched its allegiance from the principles that gave it purpose to a man whose only purpose is himself. Donald Trump is a weak man pretending to be strong. He is a small man pretending to be big. He's a faithless man pretending to be righteous. He's a perpetrator who can't stop playing the victim. He puts on, listen, he puts on quite a show, but there is no real strength there. As a conservative and a veteran, I believe true strength lies in defending the vulnerable. It's in protecting your family. It's in standing up for our Constitution and our democracy. That is the soul of being a conservative. It used to be the soul of being a Republican, but Donald Trump has suffocated the soul of the Republican Party. His fundamental weakness has coursed through my party like an illness, sapping our strength, softening our spine, whipping us into a fever that has untethered us from our values. Our democracy was frayed by the events of January 6th, as Donald Trump's deceit and dishonor led to a siege on the United States Capitol. That day, I stood witness to a profound sorrow, the desecration of our sacred tradition of peaceful transition of power, tarnished by a man too fragile, too vain, and too weak to accept defeat. How can a party claim to be patriotic if it idolizes a man who tried to overthrow a free and fair election? How can a party claim to stand for liberty if it sees a fight for freedom in Ukraine, an attack pitting tyranny against democracy, a challenge to everything our nation claims to be, and it retreats, it equivocates, it nominates a man who is weirdly obsessed with Putin? And his running mate who said, quote, "I don't care what happens in Ukraine." Yeah, and he wants to be vice president. Yeah. How can a party claim to be conservative when it tarnishes the gifts that our forebears fought for? Men like my grandfather, who served in World War II, who believed in a cause bigger than himself, and he risked his life for it behind enemy lines. To preserve American democracy, his generation found the courage to face down armies. Listen, all we're asked to do is to summon the courage to stand up to one weak man. Some have questioned why I've taken the stand I have. The answer is really simple, ladies and gentlemen. We must put country first. And tonight, as a Republican speaking before you, I'm putting our country first. Because the fact is, I do belong here. I know Kamala Harris shares my allegiance to the rule of law, the Constitution, and democracy. And she is dedicated to upholding all three in service to our country. Whatever policies we disagree on pale in comparison with those fundamental matters of principle, of decency, and of fidelity to this nation. Listen, to my fellow Republicans, if you still pledge allegiance to those principles, I suspect you belong here too. Because democracy knows no party. It's a living, breathing ideal that defines us as a nation. It's the bedrock that separates us from tyranny, and when that foundation is fractured, we must all stand together, united, to strengthen it. If you think those principles are worth defending, then I urge you, make the right choice. Vote for our bedrock values and vote for Kamala Harris. God bless you.
Please welcome lawyer, policy advocate, and sister
Remarkable
of the
to
Vice
hear from a
President,
Republican
Maya
congressman
Harris.
saying that the American people should vote for Kamala Harris. We can talk more about this, but I don't want to interrupt Maya Harris, who is the younger sister of Kamala Harris. Let's listen.
Hello, Chicago. In 1958, a 19-year-old from India left the only country she'd ever known to chart her own path in America. She came here to pursue an education, but she stayed here to build a life. Her name was Dr. Shamala Gopalan Harris. But we called her Mommy. Mommy was so many things to so many people. A civil rights activist, a scientist, a devoted mother to her 2 little girls. But most of all, Mommy was a trailblazer who defied the odds and defined herself. And when it came to Kamala and me, Mommy had great expectations for us, but she had even greater expectations of us. She raised us to believe that we could be and do anything. And we believed her. You see, Mommy understood the power and the possibility that come with knowing and showing who you truly are. She knew we could be the authors of our own stories, just as she'd been the author of her own. Mommy's journey and the opportunity that she wanted for Kamala and me, that's a distinctly American story. We may all have different histories, different struggles, or different perspectives, but what binds us together is the fervent desire to be free, to fulfill our God-given potential. Kamala's entire life has been about fighting for each of us to have that freedom. And like so many Americans, Kamala knows what it's like to be underestimated and be counted out. She knows what it's like to be the underdog and yet still beat the odds. And now, she has created so much electricity, so much optimism, so much joy throughout the nation, and it is why we need her leadership in this historic moment. We are living in a time when some are trying to divide us, to separate us in ways that make it difficult for us to come together. Well, look, my sister rejects that view. Where others push darkness, Kamala sees promise. Where others feel detachment, Kamala fosters connection. Where others want to drag us back to the past, my sister says, hold up now, we are not going back. Because Kamala understands we have so much more in common than what separates us. She knows the measure of our success isn't just winning an election. It's about who we bring along and lift up in the process. And so as I look out at all of you today and take in this incredible moment, I so wish that Mommy could be here tonight. I can just see her smiling, saying how proud she is of Kamala. And then, without missing a beat, she say, "That's enough, you got work to do." She would tell all of us to roll up our sleeves and get to work, to elect a leader who sees the potential in each of us, a leader who cares for all of us, a leader who fights for every one of us. Our Democratic nominee, my big sister, the next President of the United States, Kamala Harris.
Please welcome North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper.
The last guy standing between you and the moment we're all waiting for. So I'm going to get right to it. All week, you've heard stories about my friend Kamala. I want to take you behind the scenes of one of them. 2011 was a rough time for American homeowners. Hundreds of thousands were losing their homes to illegal foreclosure. I was Attorney General in North Carolina, while Kamala had just become California's. All the AGs were close to a settlement with the big banks, and it was a pretty good deal. Would have meant $4 billion for California families who'd been ripped off. I know that sounds like a lot, but Kamala said, hang on a minute. I've met these families. I know what they've been through, and they deserve more. She went toe-to-toe with some of the world's most powerful executives, and she refused to give in. Let me tell you, this was a huge risk, but she knew it was a risk worth taking. That's Kamala. And we all know what happened. The banks caved. That $4 billion for California families became $20 billion. That was the first time I witnessed Kamala in action. And what I saw was a leader who does exactly what she says she's going to do, who never will settle for less. America, we got a lot of big fights ahead of us. And we've got one hell of a fighter ready to take them on. I know that. I know that because I know her. And tonight, I want the American people to know, even if you don't agree with her on everything, Kamala Harris will fight for you to the very end. For families who need better health care or a safer place to live, Kamala will fight for you. For parents who want better schools for their kids, for workers worried about a secure retirement for themselves. Kamala will fight for you. For any one of our allies anywhere in the world wondering if America still has your back, remember this: Kamala will fight for you. And when she fights, we win. Kamala's ready. Kamala's ready. The question is, are we? Are we going to stand up and fight for Kamala like she'll stand up and fight for us? All right. If you're ready, my home state of North Carolina, stand up. Stand up, Pennsylvania. Stand up, Michigan. Stand up, Wisconsin. Stand up, Georgia. Stand up, Nevada. Stand up, Arizona. Stand up, America. Are we going to stand up? Are we going to fight? Are we going to vote? Are we going to win? You bet we are. Let's go get them.
We are moments away from hearing Vice President Kamala Harris and the speaking slot before her given to North Carolina's governor. The reason, that's one of those 7 battleground states, probably the toughest of all 7 for a Democrat to win, but an electorally rich state in terms of electoral votes. And you heard the governor there shouting out all of those important states that the Democrats need for victory.
Do you think that was on purpose, Nora? He's just calling out random states.
No, those were the battleground
there was
states.
some strategery involved there.
There absolutely was. And I noticed that line, too. Kamala is ready. The question is,
are we ready for her? I always like it, guys, when you've had a week like this where you've heard great speeches and you hear a line we go, ooh, I haven't heard that one before. That was a line that I thought, well done, Governor
The call
Cooper.
and response always works well in this room. North Carolina is a state that they've struggled with in the past, but they think is winnable this year. They believe there's a big governor's race coming up because Roy Cooper is about to be term limited out. There is a Republican candidate, Mark Robinson, who they believe is weak. He's very far right. He said some really controversial things that they don't think will play well in North Carolina. Abortion is a big issue there, so they think that North Carolina's on the table. That's one reason that Roy Cooper got that plum speaking spot tonight. The other reason is he goes way back with Kamala Harris. They were both state attorneys general. They have worked together for years. She has visited North Carolina again and again throughout her vice presidency. I think it's the 16th or 17th time that she's gone to North Carolina to visit him, and he was on the short list for vice president.
Then he pulled out, didn't he? Didn't he remove himself from consideration?
He pulled out, and he said that he needed to stay in North Carolina because this controversial lieutenant governor, who we were just talking about, he thought that he would, try to take over when he was out of the state.
And North Carolina has that rule when he's out of the state that he actually, I believe, power shifts to the lieutenant governor. So it wasn't just. The other thing about North Carolina is it's a reminder of how much this race has changed. The map, we knew about the 7 battleground states, but nobody was talking about North Carolina as a viable option for Joe Biden. Also not really, also slipping away were Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada, other Sunbelt states, fast-growing states with a new population, younger population. Those are now in play with her in a way that they weren't with Joe Biden. And why is that important? She may or may not get those states, but it forces her opponent to spend time in those states. He can't just sit in a limited number of states. He's now got to play in all 7, and that is it's a drain on resources, which include his time and his money.
It's an excellent point. I want to check in now with Robert Costa, who has some new reporting. Robert?
To build on what John was talking about in NC2, I've been talking to the Harris campaign, and they say Governor Cooper was on stage tonight, not just to talk about North Carolina and to make a play for that state, but it's about making a play for the Deep South. We're here in Chicago. We hear so much about the industrial Midwest. I love the Midwest. These campaigns love the Midwest. But the Democrats believe when you look at a state like Georgia, there's opportunity there. 2 Democratic senators elected in 2021. They want to start to make inroads. Where is Shawn Fain, the head of the UAW, going? Chattanooga, Tennessee. They see an opportunity to unionize in the Deep South and to grow the Democratic coalition. A lot of people moving there to that part of the country because of the cost of living, moving away from some of the more major urban areas of this country. So when we talk about the Sun Belt, we talked about the industrial Midwest, those are the battlegrounds. But the Deep South, as much a battleground as any out there. And former President Trump knows it. He keeps going back to Georgia. And what did Trump just do moments ago? He praised Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, his sometime foil, on social media. An example of how Trump recognizes he might need to mend those relationships in Georgia to keep it in play.
It's an excellent point and a sign that the Trump campaign may be worried, as Robert points out, that Donald Trump trying to mend some fences. Let's go now to Ed O'Keefe, who is in the midst of the California delegation, the home state of Kamala Harris. Ed?
Nora, they have handed out these placards with her name on them for her arrival. Her husband, Doug Emhoff, the second gentleman, their children are in the front row with her brother-in-law and her young nieces. Just behind them, the California governor, the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and this crowd watching a biographical video about her. Remember, the thought was they might all be attending a funeral, the Democrats, if Joe Biden had stayed in. Instead, it's a wedding, many have said.
And there she is, to Beyonce's Freedom.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Okay, let's get to business. Let's get to business. All right. So let me start by thanking thanking my most incredible husband, Doug, for being an incredible partner to me, an incredible father to Cole and Ella, and happy anniversary, Dougie. I love you so very much. To our President Joe Biden, when I think about the path that we have traveled together, Joe, I am filled with gratitude. Your record is extraordinary, as history will show, and your character is inspiring. And Doug and I love you and Jill and are forever thankful to you both. And to Coach Tim Walz, you are going to be an incredible vice president. And to the delegates and everyone who has put your faith in our campaign, your support is humbling. So, America, the path that led me here in recent weeks was no doubt unexpected. But I'm no stranger to unlikely journeys. So, my mother, our mother, Shamala Harris, had one of her own. And I miss her every day, and especially right now. And I know she's looking down, smiling. I know that. So my mother was 19 when she crossed the world alone, traveling from India to California with an unshakable dream to be the scientist who would cure breast cancer. When she finished school, she was supposed to return home to a traditional arranged marriage. But as fate would have it, she met my father, Donald Harris, a student from Jamaica. They fell in love and got married, and that act of self-determination made my sister Maya and me. Growing up, we moved a lot. I will always remember that big Mayflower truck packed with all our belongings, ready to go to Illinois, to Wisconsin, and wherever our parents' jobs took us. My early memories of our parents together are very joyful ones. A home filled with laughter and music, Aretha, Coltrane, and Miles. At the park, my mother would say, "Stay close." But my father would say, as he smiled, "Run, Kamala, run. Don't be afraid. Don't let anything stop you." From my earliest years, he taught me to be fearless. But the harmony between my parents did not last. When I was in elementary school, they split up. And it was mostly my mother who raised us. Before she could finally afford to buy a home, she rented a small apartment in the East Bay. In the Bay, you either live in the hills or the flatlands. We lived in the flats. A beautiful working-class neighborhood of firefighters, nurses, and construction workers, all who tended their lawns with pride. My mother, she worked long hours, and like many working parents, she leaned on a trusted circle to help raise us. Mrs. Shelton, who ran the daycare below us and became a second mother. Uncle Sherman, Aunt Mary, Uncle Freddie, Auntie Chris. None of them family by blood, and all of them family by love. Family who taught us how to make gumbo, how to play chess, and sometimes even let us win. family who loved us, believed in us, and told us we could be anything and do anything. They instilled in us the values they personified: community, faith, and the importance of treating others as you would want to be treated, with kindness, respect, and compassion. My mother was a brilliant, 5-foot-tall, brown woman with an accent. And as the eldest child, I saw how the world would sometimes treat her. But my mother never lost her cool. She was tough, courageous, a trailblazer in the fight for women's health, and she taught Maya and me a lesson that Michelle mentioned the other night. She taught us to never complain about injustice, but do something about it. Do something about it. That was my mother. And she taught us, and she also taught us, and never do anything half-assed. And that is a direct quote. A direct quote. I grew up immersed in the ideals of the civil rights movement. My parents had met at a civil rights gathering, and they made sure that we learned about civil rights leaders, including the lawyers like Thurgood Marshall and Constance Baker Motley, those who battled in the courtroom to make real the promise of America. So at a young age, I decided I wanted to do that work. I wanted to be a lawyer. And when it came time to choose the type of law I would pursue, I reflected on a pivotal moment in my life. You see, when I was in high school, I started to notice something about my best friend, Wanda. She was sad at school, and there were times she didn't want to go home. So one day I asked if everything was all right, and she confided in me that she was being sexually abused by her stepfather. And I immediately told her she had to come stay with us, and she did. This is one of the reasons I became a prosecutor, to protect people like Wanda, because I believe everyone has a right to safety, to dignity, and to justice. As a prosecutor, when I had a case, I charged it not in the name of the victim, but in the name of the people. For a simple reason. In our system of justice, a harm against any one of us is a harm against all of us. And I would often explain this to console survivors of crime, to remind them no one should be made to fight alone. We are all in this together. And every day in the courtroom, I stood proudly before a judge and I said 5 words: Kamala Harris for the people. And to be clear, my entire career, I've only had one client, the people. And so, on behalf of the people, on behalf of every American, regardless of party, race, gender, or the language your grandmother speaks, on behalf of my mother and everyone who has ever set out on their own unlikely journey, on behalf of Americans like the people I grew up with, people who work hard, chase their dreams, and look out for one another. On behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth, I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America. And with this election, our nation with this election has a precious, fleeting opportunity to move past the bitterness, cynicism, and divisive battles of the past, a chance to chart a new way forward. Not as members of any one party or faction, but as Americans. And let me say, I know there are people of various political views watching tonight, and I want you to know, I promise to be a president for all Americans. You can always trust me to put country above party and self, to hold sacred America's fundamental principles, from the rule of law to free and fair elections to the peaceful transfer of power. I will be a president who unites us around our highest aspirations, a president who leads and listens, who is realistic, practical, and has common sense, and always fights for the American people. From the courthouse to the White House, that has been my life's work. As a young courtroom prosecutor in Oakland, California, I stood up for women and children against predators who abuse them. As Attorney General of California, I took on the big banks, delivered $20 billion for middle-class families who faced foreclosure, and helped pass a homeowner Bill of Rights, one of the first of its kind in the nation. I stood up for veterans and students being scammed by big for-profit colleges, for workers who are being cheated out of their wages, the wages they were due, for seniors facing elder abuse. I fought against the cartels who traffic in guns and drugs and human beings, who threaten the security of our border and the safety of our communities. And I will tell you, these fights were not easy, and neither were the elections that put me in those offices. We were underestimated at practically every turn, but we never gave up, because the future is always worth fighting for. A fight for America's future. Fellow Americans, this election is not only the most important of our lives, it is one of the most important in the life of our nation. In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious. Consider not only the chaos and calamity when he was in office, but also the gravity of what has happened since he lost the last election. Donald Trump tried to throw away your votes. When he failed, he sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol, where they assaulted law enforcement officers. When politicians in his own party begged him to call off the mob and send help, he did the opposite. He fanned the flames. And now, for an entirely different set of crimes, he was found guilty of fraud by a jury of everyday Americans and separately found liable for committing sexual abuse. And consider what he intends to do if we give him power again. Consider his explicit intent to set free violent extremists who assaulted those law enforcement officers at the Capitol. His explicit intent to jail journalists, political opponents, and anyone he sees as the enemy. His explicit intent to deploy our active duty military against our own citizens. Consider the power he will have, especially after the United States Supreme Court just ruled that he would be immune from criminal prosecution. Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails, and how he would use the immense powers of the presidency of the United States, not to improve your life, not to strengthen our national security, but to serve the only client he has ever had, himself. And we know what a second Trump term would look like. It's all laid out in Project 2025, written by his closest advisors, and its sum total is to pull our country back to the past. But America, we are not going back. We are not going back. We are not going back. We are not going back to when Donald Trump tried to cut Social Security and Medicare. We are not going back to when he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, when insurance companies could deny people with pre-existing conditions. We are not going to let him eliminate the Department of Education that funds our public schools. We are not going to let him end programs like Head Start that provide preschool and childcare for our children. America, we are not going back. And we are charting a new way forward. Forward to a future with a strong and growing middle class, because we know a strong middle class has always been critical to America's success. And building that middle class will be a defining goal of my presidency. And I'll tell you, this is personal for me. The middle class is where I come from. My mother kept a strict budget. We lived within our means, yet we wanted for little. And she expected us to make the most of the opportunities that were available to us and to be grateful for them. Because, as she taught us, opportunity is not available to everyone. That's why we will create what I call an opportunity economy where everyone has the chance to compete and a chance to succeed. Whether you live in a rural area, small town, or big city. And as president, I will bring together labor and workers and small business owners and entrepreneurs and American companies to create jobs, to grow our economy, and to lower the cost of everyday needs like health care and housing and groceries. We will provide access to capital for small business owners and entrepreneurs and founders. And we will end America's housing shortage and protect Social Security and Medicare. Now compare that to Donald Trump, because I think everyone here knows he doesn't actually fight for the middle class. He doesn't actually fight for the middle class. Instead, he fights for himself and his billionaire friends. And he will give them another round of tax breaks that will add up to $5 trillion to the national debt. And all the while, he intends to enact what in effect is a national sales tax, call it a Trump tax, that would raise prices on middle-class families by almost $4,000 a year. Well, instead of a Trump tax hike, we will pass a middle-class tax cut that will benefit more than 100 million Americans. Friends, I believe America cannot truly be prosperous unless Americans are fully able to make their own decisions about their own lives, especially on matters of heart and home. But tonight, in America, too many women are not able to make those decisions. And let's be clear about how we got here. Donald Trump handpicked members of the United States Supreme Court to take away reproductive freedom. And now he brags about it. In his words, quote, "I did it and I'm proud to have done it," end quote. Well, I'll tell you, over the past 2 years, I've traveled across our country, and women have told me their stories. Husbands and fathers have shared theirs. Stories of women miscarrying in a parking lot, developing sepsis, losing the ability to ever again have children, all because doctors are afraid they may go to jail for caring for their patients. Couples just trying to grow their family, cut off in the middle of IVF treatments. Children who have survived sexual assault, potentially being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. This is what's happening in our country because of Donald Trump. And understand, he is not done. As a part of his agenda, he and his allies would limit access to birth control, ban medication abortion, and enact a nationwide abortion ban with or without Congress. And get this, he plans to create a national anti-abortion coordinator and force states to report on women's miscarriages and abortions. Simply put, they are out of their minds. And one must ask, why exactly is it that they don't trust women? Well, we trust women. We trust women. And when Congress passes a bill to restore reproductive freedom, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. In this election, many other fundamental freedoms are at stake. The freedom to live safe from gun violence in our schools, communities, and places of worship. The freedom to love who you love openly and with pride. The freedom to breathe clean air and drink clean water and live free from the pollution that fuels the climate crisis. And the freedom that unlocks all the others, the freedom to vote. With this election, we finally have the opportunity to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. And let me be clear, after decades in law enforcement, I know the importance of safety and security, especially at our border. Last year, Joe and I brought together Democrats and conservative Republicans to write the strongest border bill in decades. The Border Patrol endorsed it. But Donald Trump believes a border deal would hurt his campaign. So he ordered his allies in Congress to kill the deal. Well, I refuse to play politics with our security. And here is my pledge to you. As president, I will bring back the bipartisan border security bill that he killed, and I will sign it into law. I know we can live up to our proud heritage as a nation of immigrants and reform our broken immigration system. We can create an earned pathway to citizenship and secure our border. And America, we must also be steadfast in advancing our security and values abroad. As Vice President, I have confronted threats to our security, negotiated with foreign leaders, strengthened our alliances, and engaged with our brave troops overseas. As Commander-in-Chief, I will ensure America always has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world. And I will fulfill our sacred obligation to care for our troops and their families, and I will always honor and never disparage their service and their sacrifice. I will make sure that we lead the world into the future on space and artificial intelligence, that America, not China, wins the competition for the 21st century, and that we strengthen, not abdicate, our global leadership. Trump, on the other hand, threatened to abandon NATO. He encouraged Putin to invade our allies, said Russia could, quote, do whatever the hell they want. 5 days before Russia attacked Ukraine, I met with President Zelensky to warn him about Russia's plan to invade. I helped mobilize a global response, over 50 countries, to defend against Putin's aggression. President, I will stand strong with Ukraine and our NATO allies. With respect to the war in Gaza, President Biden and I are working around the clock because now is the time to get a hostage deal and a ceasefire deal done. And let me be clear, I will always stand up for Israel's right to defend itself, and I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself, because the people of Israel must never again face the horror that a terrorist organization called Hamas caused on October 7, including unspeakable sexual violence and the massacre of young people at a music festival. At the same time, what has happened in Gaza over the past 10 months is devastating. So many innocent lives lost. Desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety over and over again. The scale of suffering is heartbreaking. President Biden and I are working to end this war such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination. And know this, I will never hesitate to take whatever action is necessary to defend our forces and our interests against Iran and Iran-backed terrorists. I will not cozy up to tyrants and dictators like Kim Jong-un who are rooting for Trump, Because, you know, they know he is easy to manipulate with flattery and favors. They know Trump won't hold autocrats accountable because he wants to be an autocrat himself. And as president, I will never waver in defense of America's security and ideals, because in the enduring struggle between democracy and tyranny, I know where I stand and I know where the United States belongs. I love our country with all my heart. Everywhere I go, in everyone I meet, I see a nation that is ready to move forward, ready for the next step in the incredible journey that is America. I see an America where we hold fast to the fearless belief that built our nation and inspired the world, that here in this country, anything is possible, that nothing is out of reach. An America where we care for one another, look out for one another, and recognize that we have so much more in common than what separates us. That none of us has to fail for all of us to succeed. And that in unity there is strength. You know, our opponents in this race are out there every day denigrating America, talking about how terrible everything is. Well, my mother had another lesson she used to teach. Never let anyone tell you who you are. You show them who you are. America, let us show each other and the world who we are and what we stand for. Freedom, opportunity, compassion, dignity, fairness, and endless possibilities. We are the heirs to the greatest democracy in the history of the world. And on behalf of our children and our grandchildren and all those who sacrificed so dearly for our freedom and liberty, we must be worthy of this moment. It is now our turn to do what generations before us have done, guided by optimism and faith, to fight for this country we love, to fight for the ideals we cherish, and to uphold the awesome responsibility that comes with the greatest privilege on earth, the privilege and pride of being an American. So let's get out there, let's fight for it, let's get out there, let's vote for it, and together let us write the next great chapter in the most extraordinary story ever told. Thank you. God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you all.
Well, if you didn't think you knew Kamala Harris before, you may know her now. This was a powerful, strong speech. It started off about biography, an extraordinary journey that her mother at the age of 19 crossed an ocean by herself, in a story that can only happen in America, as she said. But the back half of this speech was tough.
I also thought to start, what a amazing, hell of an anniversary. It's her 10th wedding anniversary that she started paying tribute to her husband. There he is on stage with her. You know, I thought Nora got a sense of her, but I thought she went much further than I thought she was going to do. She touched on nearly every hot button issue.
Absolutely.
And took it straight on. She was very, very strident, very adamant about where she stands.
Well, first of all, this is the cleanest, biggest audience she will have, because there will be a debate, but that'll be chopped up, and this was her most direct moment to deliver. And what she delivered was not just her record and not just a very strong indictment of Donald Trump and her positions, but a definition of America, and an America out of which she grew. An America, a middle-class America surrounded by nurses, firefighters, a blended family. One of the best lines, just as a matter of just rhetoric, none of the family bound by blood, but all of them bound by love, a family bound by love. She defined the America she came out of, and then is basically prosecuting the case to defend that America.
When she said, too, guys, we must be worthy of this moment, people were wondering, is she going to meet this moment? I think she did. You know, I think for many people, you've seen Kamala in a different light, the way she walks, the way she talks, and she seems very, very secure and very confident in what she believes and what she's going to do.
And here come the balloons. There are 100,000 of them, we're told. And the campaign said beforehand that one of her main goals was to create a contrast between herself and Donald Trump. And boy, did she go there. Among the most memorable lines in this speech, he wants to be an autocrat. She said that autocrats know that he is easy to manipulate with flattery and favors. And she asked, why exactly is it that they don't trust women.
No, I love.
And then she said, well, we trust women.
Yes.
She went there. I can't remember hearing a major party candidate or a president of the United States talk about access to birth control, medication abortion, sepsis that women face, women's health, children's health care, all of that. When she talked about and accused the Trump administration of trying to issue a nationwide abortion ban and more, she said, simply put, they are out of their minds. I use the word tough because Governor Walz says they're weird.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris said today they're out of their minds.
And the way she delivered that line, too, Nora, was also very deliberate. She said, imagine a Donald Trump with no guardrails. Donald Trump, she said, is an unserious man, but the consequences of putting back in office is extremely serious. She went there, too, Nancy, as you said, when she took on Donald Trump directly, too.
Right, and I think women often have a higher bar to cross, particularly when it comes to looking tough, when it comes to national security. And on that point, she said, I have negotiated with foreign leaders. I have interacted with our troops, and I will never waver in my support of the United States.
Yeah, you could have, the foreign policy portion of the speech, you could have just, that could have been John McCain in 2008. And so there was, that was consistent with all of what we saw before. But the idea of her story could only happen in America, and her argument is, and unless we defend it, that America will go away. That is a call to be inspired by her story, but it also contains that other part, which is the peril.
Let's check in with Tony Dokoupil, who is on the convention floor. Tony?
Nora, I am on the convention floor, but that floor is now covered up to my waist in balloons. I think the confetti's in the air, the big balloons are flying, and the 2024 Democratic National Convention is definitely in the books, and people are loving it down here. Chuck Schumer, was he dancing, was he prancing? I just saw him go by. We've got cheers, we've got a certain underwater quality as people dodge the balloons, a certain concert quality as people wait and enjoy the music. And I will leave the reviewing of the content to you, but the emotion and the feeling down here is, I don't know, 7-year-old's birthday party is how I would put it. There is joy and there's not a lot of thinking. It's a good time.
All right, let's check in now with Ed O'Keefe. Ed?
Nora, there was no Beyonce, no Taylor Swift, but 100,000 balloons are falling from the ceiling. The Democrats went out of their way to make very clear, red, white, blue, no gold balloons. You remember at the Republican convention, Donald Trump asked for gold. None of those here tonight. The crowd wrapped in attention throughout this speech, listening as the vice president described her life story and laid out pretty quickly what she'd do domestically and on foreign policy, especially loving those lines about how this is the greatest country in the world, how she loves this country, how it was only possible here for her parents to meet. A sign, as Tony and others have observed throughout the week, that patriotism really is now a big theme for this party as they try to unite the country and win enough votes to hold on to the White House. Just a lot of balloons, Nora. To be perfectly honest.
So many balloons that you're at a loss for words. That's hard to believe, Ed O'Keefe, but thank you.
You're up to the knees.
Well, you made an excellent point. I had forgotten about the gold balloons at the Republican National Convention, but patriotism, a strong theme all of this week with the flags, with the big signs that said USA. You would think you could be at the Olympics almost, the patriotism that was displayed here all this week. Nancy?
And you think that Ed's joking about the gold balloon thing, but actually no, we got an email from the campaign that says point blank, there are no gold balloons in the Democratic National Convention balloon drop, just red, white, and blue. Obviously, Donald Trump, a big fan of gold. Trump Tower covered in gold. There have always been jokes about the gold toilet in the bathroom at Trump Tower. No gold here tonight.
Well, the concern about people not knowing who she is and what she stands for, I certainly think that she answered that question tonight.
Agreed. She not only laid out her own biography, talked about her motivation for becoming a prosecutor. She had a classmate who had been the victim of sexual abuse. She talked about where she was from.
And then, Nora, let's stop there for a second about the classmate who was a victim of sexual abuse. Back then, it was unheard of to even discuss. Most of us didn't even know that such a thing was possible. So for her at that young age to be exposed to that and say to her friend, you can come with me, and that influenced her decision to later be a prosecutor, I think is extremely powerful.
She also, in talking about January 6th, she also reminded people that she's a member of law enforcement as a prosecutor, which I thought was an interesting way to contextualize. She was always be concerned, she said, about the safety and security of the United States.
And one tiny little thing, Donald Trump's argument is make America great again. This speech said America's already great.
Robert Costa is on the floor as well. Robert?
As we watch the balloons fall, we are all also witnessing something dramatic in real time, the beginning of a tug of war of the nation's civic fabric. You have a former president who told me earlier this week over the phone that he sees the Democrats as a corrupt party, a party that's a disaster in power. He casts them as a party that would bring the country further into darkness. Here at this convention, you had a nominee introducing herself to the country, but also warning the country that in her view, Donald Trump is a threat fundamentally to American democracy. This is not a red versus blue ideological battle. This is not a typical campaign. This is a new chapter, as she said, in the American story. But we're looking ahead to something that could be tumultuous for the country as it deals with two parties truly pulling at the definition of what it means to be an American.
Robert Costa, thank you. And history made here tonight in Chicago. Vice President Kamala Harris is now the first Black and South Asian woman to officially be the presidential nominee for a major political party in the United States. Just take that in. We just witnessed that. Election Day is in 75 days, and the campaign sprint officially begins now, and we will cover it every step of the way. And that is the close of this year's Democratic National Convention. A big thank you to our correspondents, analysts, and contributors and crew. And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you for joining us. I'm Nora O'Donnell. Good night.